I want to stop it at a certain point. I actually don't even want to tell this story.
I was like, well, I guess this is the most hot dogs I've ever been paid for a gig in my life.
They had the pastor, I guess he was, get on the dance floor in the middle of the floor.
There were gigs everywhere. Like, nobody was not working that night.
What is the most you've made on a New Year's Eve gig? What is the most you've made on New Year's Eve? It appears that New Year's Eve gigs tend to pay more.
Oh yeah.
The most I've ever made at playing New Year's Eve was...
Yo, this lighting is terrible. What the heck? So the date is December 30th, 2022. New Year's Eve is tomorrow night. Tonight I'm playing a wedding gig, and then tomorrow night I'm playing a New Year's Eve party gig. I've only ever played one New Year's Eve gig. I'm pretty young. I haven't had a whole lot of gig experience. But luckily I get to play with a ton of great musicians that have played hundreds of gigs. So I'm hoping that tonight and tomorrow night I can talk to them and hear their craziest New Year's Eve gig story. But for now I'm going to unload my stuff and make my way to the venue for tonight's gig, which is a wedding at the Omni Penn Hotel here in Pittsburgh.
Get my good side.
Yeah, what is your good side? Both sides are pretty
It's like right in the front.
Perfect.
I kind of have two. Like they're like fairly short. Like New Year's Eve 2018 or 2019. We're playing a very fancy event at Seven Springs. We didn't exactly know like what was going on, but it was a circus theme event. So the green room where we ate also included like people who were like contortionists and like acrobats and like doing all kinds of like weird shit while we're just like trying to eat our food.
Yeah,
We're
like
in
sword swallowers like eating breadsticks whole and stuff.
yeah. Well, I was doing that, but yeah, they were practicing with swords. It was a bizarre event. It's like we would play, you know, our typical music that we do, and all the while there'd be like these like people like stacking on top of each other like while we're playing and like doing like weird like hula hoop like things.
I want to dance
and stuff. Yeah, right. Yeah, we would like play that funky music. We're playing like You Can Call Me Al, and like someone's like lighting themselves on fire. Like this seems ridiculous. So that was weird. And then like it was a snowstorm that night too. So like we had to like push. I had to help push like 3 of our band members' cars like up out of the hill
So you were
once we
leading
got
that
in.
gig instead.
Yeah. It was weird. The circus theme was like, it's not often that like you play a gig and you're like surrounded by. Some of them were like, I'm like, I think if I tried that, I might be a little bit better. but like for the most part, they were good. But yeah, some of them were like.
I wonder if they're like standing on top of each other, juggling, watching you play guitar. Like, I could probably do that.
Yeah, they're probably thinking the same thing. They're like, man, that guy gets paid to do that. He gets to play Brown Eyed Girl, and I'm up here like putting my legs behind my head. That was a fun one. And then I have a short story on my very first New Year's Eve gig that I ever played. And I'm trying to think if this was in high school or if it was shortly after. But the high school I went to, when you got to a certain age, like junior, senior, they would start to like get you gigs and like kind of farm you out for gigs. Like they had deals with little corporate events and like places around town where you could actually go and play a paying gig, which was like really dope as a young musician. And so like, we're just like young. I was probably 17. There was a hot dog shop that operated out of the basement of a church.
What?
They were having a New Year's Eve party. They hired, I guess, our little trio. It was like bass, guitar, and drums, I think. Something like that. Maybe there was a sax involved. There's a good chance that Leo Pellegrino was the sax player on this thing. Yeah, because
was he the same age as you?
no, he was a couple years younger, but he was like so good that he could hang with. And like I wasn't very good even as a senior. So yeah, we like set up in this like hot dog shop. It's a really small little like dungeon-y looking place, and it fills up with people, and they're like DJ music, and then like we're playing, and like everyone's having a really good time, and it's like we're like tucked in a corner. It's like a little tiny room. We're so new, like we don't know if we can like take a break or anything, so we just play for like 3 hours straight. We didn't know, like, I don't think we really knew like what we were doing. And even if we were to take a break, we wouldn't have been able to get outside or do anything. It was just slamming. It was like past midnight. I'm like okay, I guess we're done, and started packing up our stuff. Someone came over from the hot dog shop and were like, hey, so there was like something like happened with the check or something, and like anytime someone said that to us now as adults, we're like, no, they'll figure it out. But as a 17-year-old kid, we're like, oh shoot, what happened to the check? They're like, well, we can't like really find it, and we're like, okay, and they're like, but we don't want. It felt like a game show. Like, we don't want you to leave empty-handed, so we're gonna give you these hot dogs to take home. They gave each of us like 30 hot dogs in like a container, and I was like, and I'm a kid, I like hot dogs, so I was like, well, I guess this is the most hot dogs I've ever been paid for a gig in my life. And that was it. There was like we're young kids, we don't know any better. We just we didn't know how to like figure that out because they didn't seem like they wanted to figure it out. They're just like, oh, we lost a check, sorry, here's some hot dogs. And so we took them hot dogs and like I ate hot dogs for like 2 weeks straight. And they're really good. Oh yeah, they're really good. So that was the pay. I think like if you look at the value of the hot dogs, they're selling a hot dog for like, $4 or something. They give me 30. I gotta pay $120 for that gig, man.
Okay, so on that topic, and you can decline to answer this if you want, but what is the most you've made on a New Year's Eve gig? 30 hot dogs is pretty hard to beat.
It's really, you can talk about a dollar amount and then you can talk about value and like what it means to you.
Yeah.
And so the hot dogs was at the top.
The hot dogs.
I don't know, probably like $1,500 or something.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, just like my job is all encompassing. I'm like in the context of like corporate events and weddings. I play guitar, I sing, I run sound, MC, and do all that stuff. So it adds up, and especially for like special events like a New Year's Eve event, there's a lot of moving parts and little stops and starts and little things you gotta like make sure you do. So,
dude, thanks for sharing that. I
yeah,
appreciate
dude,
it, man.
sure.
New Year's Day ends up with me waking up on a cruise ship floating in the middle of the Caribbean next to this with my shoes missing.
Okay, we need to hear everything.
All right, so craziest New Year's Eve story. This might be a little bit different than your conventional musician story, but I'll tell the story about my New Year's Eve, circa 2014, 13 going into 14. I was working as a musician on a cruise ship. I won't disclose which line that was, and you would think that maybe as a musician, one might be playing music as entertainment, but there was no such thing, and we played our evening's event, but then that was it. I was in the theater orchestra. We weren't responsible for playing the deck parties and stuff like that, so the rest of my bandmates, we played our show in the theater, and that was it, and we had midnight to ourselves as a crew. Except me. I was asked by our cruise director to play the role of Baby New Year. I had to I agreed for whatever reason, and I dressed up as life-size Baby New Year, and I wore like a sheet as a diaper. I don't think I had anything on my top. Like I was shirtless, and like maybe a hat, and I walked around the top pool deck of the New Year's Eve party. It was just, my soul had left my body. I wasn't able to indulge in any of the eating or drinking. I was kind of on the clock. Yeah, babies don't drink, and so I was on the clock, so, and like I missed New Year's with my friends that were in the band, and they were all in the cabins, like having a grand old time. Anyway, I got off the clock after midnight, and I run down to my cabin, and I was gonna play catch up, and so we were floating in the Caribbean, so naturally I had a lot of rum in the cabin, and that is where I'll cut the story short because it got a little wild from there. But yeah, that was my silliest, craziest New Year's Eve as a musician. So.
You can decline the answers if you want. New Year's Eve gigs are notorious for paying the most amount of money compared to other gigs.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah.
What is the most you've made?
The most I've ever made at playing New Year's Eve was 14 million.
Only 14?
It might have been 15 actually.
Okay,
Second thought. Yeah.
Did you stock options too?
Yeah, stock options, 401k, health insurance for the rest of the year.
Health insurance for the rest of the year until midnight?
I don't know if I've ever actually made 500. I've been off at 500. Honestly, I think that's the most I've ever made. And that's also, I've had other gigs like offered that I couldn't do that were around that same price. So, but I've also played for less. Like a lot less. No, I feel like I've played nice gigs too, but when I was younger and didn't know business things as much, I feel like I played for like maybe $100.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, I told you the guy got paid in hot dogs.
Well, oh yeah, that's right. That was a New Year's gig?
But he was 17.
Well, for a 17-year-old, that's a cool payday.
Yeah.
I was late for hot dogs then too. Shoot, this is funny that I'm like sitting here reflecting because since I've been on land for the past 8 years, I have been paid to be various holiday characters, and so there must be something. Yeah, I don't know. Gosh, Ooh,
Now, are there
sweet.
pictures of this somewhere?
Mm,
Pull it up.
maybe.
I'm fine.
Maybe.
If there's a picture somewhere, I'm gonna find it.
I don't think it exists on the internet.
Yeah, she said the snacks are up for grabs. But the thing is, I don't know if she wants us making all 15 soft pretzels in the freezer.
Maybe. We're making pretzels on the next set.
Yeah.
You ever hear Bob Dylan's Christmas record? That rips. That's great. It's just like a band playing like, you know, really boilerplate Christmas shit, and Bob Dylan's like, have you not heard this record? You're like, oh, could be the Andrews Sisters, Bing Crosby. Oh no. Oh no, what happened? It's a shame he didn't make that before they put Bad Santa out, because you could have soundtracked the whole with songs from that record. Is it a good cookie table though, like homemade cookies, or is it some giant eagle bullshit? Who did it? Who did it? Not just my baby daddy. If I had any New Year's Eve gig story that's worth telling, I don't remember it. You'd have to ask my wife, Dana. If it was that good, I would have drunk right through it.
Oh. New Year's Eve gigs are, to my understanding, notorious for paying more than other nights of the year. Is that true, would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
What is the most you've made on New Year's Eve?
Eric was on this gig with me too.
Oh, okay.
It was at the Greenbrier, which are you familiar with the Greenbrier? So the Greenbrier is this huge resort down in White Sulphur Springs. It's this really fancy old Southern money kind of resort. There was this guy that grew up. He actually made all his money in coal. His name was Lawson Hamilton, and he became like this super big millionaire. Super nice guy, but he was a huge fan of the Benny Benack Band. But he hired the Benny Benack Band all the time to come down there. And I kind of got in on the tail end of that because just because I was younger than those guys. But Lawson, he was great. He would treat us like we were guests of his. You know, so we would stay either in the main hotel, like in the fancy rooms that are, I don't know, $500 a night or more than that probably now at least. Or they had these cabins that were also super nice. And so we were just treated like guests, and we just had to play a gig once a night.
Yeah.
And we'd often be down there for multiple days.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whoa, that's cool.
And we got to eat in like all the fanciest restaurants, and all, you know, everything is free. And yeah, it was great. He had us there for tons of parties over the years. So anyway, he had us there for New Year's Eve, like an additional party one year. He had us there many times, but the one that I remember the most, or that paid the most, which I think, like I said, late 2000s, 08, 09, something like that. I want to say it paid $800. You know, so that was 15 years ago, maybe, even more than $800, especially now. And then at the end of every gig, Lawson would always, like, he called it roll call. He was this old, like, happy guy, and he's like, hey, Benny, get the guys round up for roll call. And so he would have everybody in the band, you'd get in a line, and while you'd walk up and say hi to Lawson and shake his hand, and he'd give you $100, like just a $100 bill. This was on top of what the gig paid you. But that night he gave us $200, so made the gig $1,000.
Yeah, that's awesome. New Year's Eve, couple wanted to get married right when the
Clock was turning.
Whoa.
So they invited their guests at like, I think they had been there from like 8 o'clock. I think they gave them like pizza or something to try to hold them over. They had the pastor, I guess he was, get on the dance floor in the middle of the floor, like right before midnight, so they could like get married right at the stroke of midnight.
Wow.
So like it was weird because it was like the reception started before the marriage actually happened. I felt bad for the guests though because they had been there for hours.
And then it's midnight.
Right.
Whoa. Did they keep partying
Yeah.
after?
Yep.
Whoa. How late did it go to?
I don't even remember, but it had to be pretty late because they just got married at midnight. I thought it was a joke at first. I was like, wait, there wasn't a ceremony before this? And they were like, no, like they want to get married right at. Like,
So the ceremony, it was like, you may not kiss the bride. You know.
Yep.
Whoa, that's a crazy wedding anniversary.
Yeah, I was like,
Was that here?
yes, it may have been in this hotel actually.
Really? Whoa, that's cool. So I've played one New Year's Eve. I'm young. Tomorrow night will be my second. It appears that New Year's Eve gigs tend to pay more.
Oh yeah.
What has been the highest paying gig you've played on New Year's Eve?
That's a good question. you.
I got offered to play one last year, but it would have paid $650. So
Right. Yeah, that might have been around the highest I got. We did one New Year's Eve at Seven Springs, but we got to stay, and I was like, we should do the buffet breakfast in the morning. Of course, we had to pay for that, but I didn't care. We were just kind of took our time and ate, and then took our time heading back the next day. So
that's easier than like
yeah,
trying to rush home and on New Year's Eve.
right. People doing crazy.
Yeah.
No.
Well, sweet. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. That's cool.
I'll tell you my Y2K New Year's Eve gig.
Okay. Yeah.
Which, if anybody doesn't know that, it's when the computers were supposed to shut down because all the digits were just 2 digits and the computers weren't going to know how to handle switching from 99 to 2000 because they were going to go back to 1900.
Whoa.
Which is what everybody thought. We don't need to worry about our gig right now, do we? I just forget what was the time of when.
Told me.
But yeah, it's a huge New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
You know, a millennial New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
So anyway, I played a gig with Matt Ferranti, and we played at the USX Steel Building, which is UPMC now.
Oh.
But it used to be the US Steel Building. And he had an early hit because there was just tons of stuff. Even though this Y2K thing was happening, it was still a huge New Year's Eve. So there were gigs everywhere. Like nobody was not working that night. So we had a short hit from like 8 to 10 or something like that, maybe 7 to 9. And then I had another gig that night, a late gig from 10 to 2 with Azucar, a salsa. No, that's my salsa band. It was the precursor to Azucar called Orquesta Tropical. So that was at Cozumel, which is in Shadyside, which is right across the street from where the balcony used to be. And so I played a salsa gig there, and it was a cool night because it was the last night for the jazz club The Balcony to be open.
Oh.
So they had a gig going across the street called Last Call at the Balcony. And it was recorded. You can still buy a CD of it, actually, of that night.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
I'll plug it.
Plug it.
Buy the CD.
Right, yeah, and buy our CD, too, the Chapter 2 Balcony Big Band CD. But on that New Year's Eve, I spent my break, I went over to the balcony and just hung out and checked that out for 20, 30 minutes, whatever my break
that
was.
Between the first gig and
on
the second.
the middle of the second gig.
Middle of the second. Okay,
Yeah, the first gig was downtown.
Okay.
The second gig was in Shadyside across the street from the balcony at this club called Cozumel.
How did you go from if your gig ended at 10? And the next one started at 10? Is that right?
You know, I don't remember,
Yeah,
and that was
20
like
years
when we
ago,
wrote stuff in books,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
so
right. Yeah,
I can't even look it up. But
Yeah.
so either there was enough time. I think I had the Matt Franny gig booked first,
Yeah.
and the salsa band. I was a regular member of that band, and that gig came up, and it was like, well, I told the band leader, I'm like, I have this other gig, and I'm going to be cutting it close, or maybe you have to come in 15 minutes late.
Cool.
It was one of those things where people were like accommodating. I may have shown up late, but it was with intentions of showing up late and acceptance of it. Yeah. So anyway, then I played that gig till 2, and the thing at Last Call for the Balcony went on way past 2. Although I wasn't like in the in crowd with that group then. I was like young. I just graduated, or actually I hadn't graduated college yet. You know, I was old enough to get in, but not old enough to like do the nefarious things that Eric DeFade and HB and Scott Anderson and Brian Strahersky and all these other guys were probably doing.
Pull it up?
Yeah.
Of course, you wish you had cameras back then, don't you?
Oh, they don't. So I don't really remember very much about either gig, other than they were both good gigs.
Nice.